Welcome to the 700 Club. A Pennsylvania man is in custody after an arson attack on the governor's mansion. Police evacuated Governor Josh Shapiro and his family in the middle of the night as the fire burned.
The attack took place just hours after the governor hosted a Passover Seder for the Jewish community. Dale Hurd reports.
Flames broke out at the governor's mansion in Harrisburg around 2 a.m. Sunday, while Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, a 2024 vice presidential contender, and his family were asleep inside.
The governor's residence reporting a large fire in the dining room on the first floor. They can see fire out the windows.
State troopers assigned to our detail banged on our door, woke us up and told us we had an emergency and needed to leave immediately. Together, we secured all of our children, our 2 dogs, our family that was staying with us.
All escaped safely. Police have arrested and will charge 38-year-old Harrisburg area resident Cody Balmer. Court records show Balmer has a lengthy criminal history with charges of assault, theft, and forgery. He told police that if he had encountered Shapiro in the residence, he'd have beaten him with a hammer. Balmer's mother, Christy Balmer, told CBS News her son is mentally ill and went off his medication. She claims she contacted police to warn them, but got no help.
The charges will include attempted murder, terrorism, aggravated arson, and aggravated assault against an enumerated person.
He clearly had a plan. He was very methodical in his approach and moved through it without a lot of hurry.
Authorities are now investigating whether the attack on the first night of Passover was motivated by Shapiro's Jewish faith. The Passover holiday, which began at sundown Saturday, commemorates the Israelites' liberation from slavery in ancient Egypt. Just hours before the fire, Shapiro shared this photo of his family's Seder table on social media, apparently the same room that was later set on fire.
Lori and I are overwhelmed by the prayers.
Shapiro condemned political violence and said the arson would not stop his family from celebrating Passover.
We celebrated our faith last night proudly, and in a few hours we will celebrate our second Seder of Passover again. It's a story of going from bondage, from slavery, into freedom. I think it's an important story, both literally and figuratively, to tell. And I refuse to be trapped by the bondage that someone attempts to put on me by attacking us as they did here last night.
Authorities are now trying to figure out how Balmer was able to scale a 7-foot security fence surrounded by surveillance cameras and enter the governor's mansion. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Well, this is obviously an horrific attack on everything that we hold dear, that we should be one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And in the middle of all of this, you have these crazed assassins trying to beat politicians with hammers. This isn't the only one where this has happened, and you just cry out, what has been unleashed in our nation that we have this kind of violence directed at our elected officials? We need to honor them and honor them for their service, regardless of what side you're on. When you take political office, you're giving up a big chunk of yourself to do that, and there's a reason we call it public service. Let's honor them instead of this kind of attack. It's just absolutely senseless. You cannot condemn it enough, and I hope all voices come into unity on this, that no, not in the United States. This doesn't and should never happen. In other news, Palm Sunday celebrations turned tragic in Ukraine. John Jessup has more on that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. John?
That's right, Gordon. Russian forces launched an attack on one of the holiest days of the Christian faith. Ballistic missiles injured more than 100 civilians and killed 34 others, including a family of 3 on their way to church. The strike hit the town of Suma. Fire crews rushed to extinguish flames in buildings and cars. This church was just about 100 yards from where one of the missiles struck. Among the victims, 2 kids, including 11-year-old Maxim and his parents, Mykola and Natalia. The Ukrainian Council of Churches and Religious Organizations condemned the attack, saying it demonstrates that nothing is sacred for Russia, and called on the world's leading nations to take all possible measures to stop Russia's aggression and for all people of goodwill to pray for the victory of truth and a just peace. Well, now to the Middle East and the negotiations between the United States and Tehran over Iran's nuclear program. The first round produced little except an agreement to hold more talks this Saturday. Both sides sending a positive message.
Nothing matters until you get it done. So I don't like talking about it, but it's going okay. The Iran situation's going pretty good.
As a first session, it was a constructive meeting. It took place in a calm and very respectful environment.
In Gaza, Israeli forces have cut off the Hamas stronghold of Rafah from the rest of Gaza. Meanwhile, Orthodox Christians in Gaza gathered to mark Palm Sunday despite their suffering. In Jerusalem, thousands of pilgrims marched with palm fronds along the path they believe Jesus followed on his final entry into Jerusalem before his crucifixion and resurrection. Well, here in the United States, a federal court ruled in favor of free speech for crisis pregnancy centers. The Northern District Court of Illinois struck down a law that forced pregnancy centers to counsel clients on the medical benefits of abortion. However, it did uphold a portion of the law requiring them to provide referrals to abortion providers. Well, for decades, pro-life pregnancy centers have faced attacks from abortion providers and their political allies, including federal, state, and local governments. Now, lawmakers on Capitol Hill hope to change that by introducing legislation designed to keep these centers and their employees safe. CBN's Charlene Aaron has the story.
In addition to protection, the Let Pregnancy Centers Serve Act of 2025 would prohibit government discrimination and retaliation against those care centers that refuse to point to abortion as an option. Pro-life lawmakers maintain the measure is needed now more than ever.
Notwithstanding any other law, the federal government and any individual or entity that receives federal financial assistance, including any state or local government, may not penalize or retaliate against an entity because the entity offers life-affirming support and resources to women facing unexpected pregnancy, or offers life-affirming alternatives to abortion, or refrains from abortion.
Several Republican House members joined Representative Chris Smith to unveil the legislation. Following the Supreme Court ending Roe v. Wade, attacks on crisis pregnancy centers increased. 2022 alone saw more than 100 such attacks nationwide, which included firebombings, vandalism, and deadly threats. Yet authorities did not make one single arrest. Now, certain states are weaponizing various laws to stop these centers from saving lives. Gabriella McIntyre, legal counsel for Alliance Defending Freedom, represents several of these pro-life clinics.
These pregnancy resource centers have been harassed not only by these blue state attorneys general and these legislatures who are attempting to pass these censorship laws and otherwise trying to prevent and interfere with these pregnancy resource centers' missions, but they've also been receiving it from the public.
In New Jersey, ADF is asking the U.S. Supreme Court to consider that Attorney General Matthew Platke's investigation into the faith-based First Choice Women's Resource Centers as unconstitutional. That's because he's demanding the group identify donors and produce up to 10 years of its internal confidential documents.
Coming from a very hostile attorney general who has said to consumers, he has issued a consumer alert stating that these pregnancy resource centers are bad for women, that they should go to Planned Parenthood instead. He's also made many public statements calling these pregnancy resource centers extremist.
In New York, Attorney General Letitia James is using her power to censor pregnancy centers over advising women about the option of using progesterone to reverse the effect of abortion pills.
Letitia James, if she has her way, would prevent women from even knowing that they have this choice.
And the state of Illinois has been sued over adding reproductive health decisions last year to its Human Rights Act. The law now can stop religious organizations from only hiring employees who share the ministry's pro-life beliefs. Such actions highlight how politicians and the abortion industry consider these pregnancy care centers as a true threat.
Because why would they spend their time attacking pregnancy centers if they weren't effective? if they weren't actually helping women and babies. And to me, that is a huge testament of the effectiveness of letting these pregnancy centers serve.
Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
A lot of movement on this front. Thank you, Charlene. Gordon?
And it's definitely needed. It's a sad state of affairs when in the United States this kind of legislation is needed. During the Biden administration, we all heard the stories of the firebombing of crisis pregnancy centers and Jane's Revenge and all of that. But on top of that was the aggressive pursuit by attorney generals, state attorney generals, and we call it lawfare, and that's exactly what it was. And it was interesting how they framed their pursuit, that somehow or other the crisis pregnancy centers were engaged in false advertising. That was one of the main arguments out of Massachusetts, and so therefore they were entitled under consumer protection laws to go after the crisis pregnancy centers. And it just boggles your mind that they would ever try to do that. It was clearly made up, and their opposition was clearly based on their own ideology, personal ideology regarding abortion, and they were trying to shut the crisis pregnancy centers down. Well, if you want to look at false advertising, just take a look at the name Planned Parenthood. There's no parenthood involved. They're all about abortion. They're not trying to make you a parent. They're trying to abort your baby. That's what they're there for, and that's what they're doing. You don't see any kind of attack against them for false advertising, and they receive millions, tens of millions of dollars in federal aid. Crisis pregnancy centers are all locally supported. It all depends on private donations of people that want to preserve life, and more importantly, want to make sure that we have another generation. Can we please have a culture that celebrates motherhood, that comes alongside mothers, and regardless of their economic circumstances or life circumstances, say, we want to help you. We want to help you and your baby. We want to make sure you get the medical care you need during pregnancy, and then after birth, what kind of support do you need? If we have a culture like that, we're ensuring our future, because children are the future. And when you lose sight of that as a culture, what exactly are you trying to do? Are you trying to crash and burn the United States of America? We need to protect children, we need to protect mothers, and we need to celebrate pregnancy. And yes, you are giving us hope, and hope for the future.